So I got this for 500 Australian dollars and it can do this.
Let's just do what you want to. Please don't be polite, cause I like your attitude. Let's forget about a curfew, cause all that is stuck in my head. It's me and you, pulse speed and my heart is racing, but I'm not sure I wanna face it, cause it only does this with you.
So when the Mavic Mini first came out, it kind of like flew under the radar for me. Like, it's a bit more of a budget drone and I've got the Mavic 2 Pro, so why would I need a cheaper drone? But it recently caught my attention again because they updated the firmware and unlocked a lot of little features that were kind of holding it back, and now it kind of makes it a bit of a professional drone. So I decided to pick one up, and honestly, best decision ever. It is so much fun. Initially when I first got it, I was super impressed. Like, it is so freaking tiny and it is so light. Like 249 grams is literally, it's like nothing. And if you're going on an adventure or going for a hike or something where you're carrying this around all day, that 250 grams literally weighs nothing, and it's so much better to carry this around. Now, the Mavic Mini is able to get 30 minutes of flight time, which is absolutely insane. Like, the battery is freaking tiny and you're still able to get 30 minutes out of it. All right, now real quick, the drone does have a lot of limitations and a lot of things you can't do, but like, if you're gonna compare it to a Mavic 2 Pro or something, like, they're in completely different leagues, so you have to kind of separate them into their own little categories. And if you really understand what the limitations are and, you know, the best kind of conditions to shoot with this drone, then you can get some absolutely insane shots like I'll show you right now.
We make out for the thrill of it, mess around for the thrill of it. Don't stop now, never let this end. For the thrill of it, we can have with no regret.
I honestly still cannot believe that that came out of a Mavic Mini. Like, now the build quality of the Mavic Mini is actually, oh, don't tell me there's a bird right there. Oh my God, go away. Now the build quality of the Mavic Mini is actually really good. Like, initially I thought, I was like, this is freaking cheap. And like, obviously it's plastic, so it's not gonna feel like super solid, but I think what makes it feel super cheap is because like, there's literally nothing to it. Like, if you look inside where the camera is, there is just nothing there. It's just basically like an empty shell to obviously make it weigh essentially nothing. Like, it's essentially only the raw components that they need to make this work. Anything that wasn't needed just got thrown to make it that 249 gram to be under the US weight limit. But I've actually crashed this thing a few times and it seems to be holding up okay. Like, I haven't had any problems with it, so yeah. I like it. The 3-axis gimbal, as with every other DJI Pro, is freaking flawless. Like, it is just so stable. And honestly, even in like windy conditions, like obviously not super windy conditions, but in windy conditions, it flies really well and the gimbal keeps up and it still keeps it very stable. Like, I honestly thought that being only 249 grams, as soon as like a gust of wind came, it would just be like flying all over the place, but it actually holds up really, really well. The battery design with this little like door thing on the back, like, although I've never had a problem with the battery falling out, it's just, I don't know, it's kind of like just nice. It makes it super neat how it's all kind of tucked in there. I think it's really cool. It does also have downwards facing sensors, so if you're flying towards something, it obviously won't stop you from flying into it, but if you fly over something, it'll sensor and it will kind of like pick it up. And the downward sensors, as far as I'm aware, are also used to kind of like keep it stable. So it kind of senses where the ground is and then it kind of uses that to, you know, hold its position in the air. And having this little memory card access at the back makes it so easy to offload footage. Like, you just like, bam, done. And you can also add some sort of little like magnetic attachment. You get some magnetic charging base or something. It's actually really cool. I don't have it, but it looks really cool, hey? All right, now as for the camera itself, you're gonna be shooting in a max resolution of 2.7K at 25 or 30 frames a second. Everyone's like, oh, it doesn't shoot 4K or whatever. Like, 2.7K is enough. Like, the 2.7K image actually looks really good. You obviously can see that it's been over sharpened to get those details and stuff, but overall, it actually looks pretty good. Like, there's a decent amount of dynamic range. Like, if you compare it to something like a Mavic 2 Pro, obviously it's gonna look completely different, but like, if you shoot in the right conditions and shoot with the correct settings, looks so freaking good. And if you want to do a little bit of slow-mo, it does shoot 1080p at 60 frames a second, so that's like cool as well. Now when you're actually flying the Mavic Mini itself and looking at the screen, the shadows look like really, really dark. And I was a little bit concerned about like dynamic range when I first got it, but the image that you see on the screen is completely different to actually what the final image looks like. So I was concerned that it was gonna be too dark. Like the shadows looked ridiculously dark, like they were completely pretty much like black. But then when you get the image onto the computer, there's actually quite a bit of detail there. And it's almost, I wouldn't say, it's not a flat profile, but it's like a uncontrasted image. I think it's actually a really nice image to like do some color grading to. But again, I really want to touch on this and emphasize the fact that you really need to know how to expose an image properly to get the best results out of this drone. If you're just relying on the auto settings, you may get some decent results sometimes, but because you're relying on the actual AI in the drone itself to basically expose for whatever you're seeing, and it doesn't know what it's seeing, sometimes it just gets completely wrong and it's like way too dark or way too bright, and it just looks terrible sometimes. Like all the shots I took were on manual settings. I don't use auto because I like to have control over my image, and I also don't like when I'm like flying through something for the exposure to change, because it takes you away and doesn't look as professional. So if you are trying to get the most professional and the best image possible, 100% shoot on manual mode. Now, flying the Mavic Mini itself, my God, so much fun. Like, so much fun. I don't know. I posted this on my Instagram and I started posting some like results from it a few weeks ago. And like all my drone friends, they're like, man, I want a Mavic Mini now, just because they can see how much fun I'm having with it and the results I'm getting. And again, it's like, I got this for 500 Australian dollars. If I crash this, it's not a big deal. If I crash my Mavic 2 Pro, that's 3,000 Australian dollars that I have to get repaired. So I don't care as much about this, which means I can take more risks and get some pretty cool shots like this. Like, I wouldn't ever even think about flying my Mavic 2 Pro through gaps like that. Like, I'm sure I probably could do it, but the chances of it crashing and the amount that it's gonna cost me to fix it is just not worth it. But this, cheap, good results, freaking love it. Plus, I just really enjoy the challenge of using like lower end gear that has limitations and you just having to kind of like work within those limitations to get the best image possible. Like, it's a fun challenge to try show other people what you can actually make with essentially like budget gear. Now, honestly, I think the main reason I'm so stoked about the Mavic Mini is because my first drone that I bought, which would have been 7 or 8 years ago, was the Phantom Vision. So the very first DJI Phantom drone, the very first one with an actual camera, and it only shot it shot 720p. It was not stable. I would have to have an aftermarket gimbal on it to actually stabilize the camera. And like, I think I was getting like 12 minutes of flight time. Like, it was just terrible. Oh, and it cost me 1,000 Australian dollars secondhand. And this thing is $500. And this thing is like 100 times better than the first drone I got. I think that's why I like it so much. Now, if you're a beginner pilot or you've never flown a drone before and you want to get into it, this thing is so good. Like, this is gonna be absolutely perfect for you because you're not gonna push the boundaries. You're not gonna fly, 4 kilometers out to sea to chase whales. I mean, I hope you're not anyway. But you're not gonna like go crazy with it and need all those extra features that you get with a more expensive drone. Like, the image that it produces is more than enough for most people. I know it's not 4K and all this, but 2.7K is more than enough for your everyday person. And like, it is so easy to fly. Like, DJI have some crazy algorithms to understand, when it gets hit by wind, it kind of like corrects itself and stuff. But it is just so easy to fly and you don't have to stress too much. Like when I was flying my first drone like 8 years ago. Oh man, that thing was so stressful. And now because they've released that new firmware, which basically unlocks everything, like this is potentially like, I'd say a semi-professional drone. Like, it would actually be interesting to use this on a professional shoot and see if the client could actually notice the difference or not. Now, obviously, like I've been saying, there are some limitations with this drone, so let's go through those so you know exactly what you're getting into. The first thing is that it uses a Wi-Fi connection to connect from the drone to your controller, not OcuSync like some of the more expensive drones that DJI makes. And this is absolutely fine if you're just flying like within close proximity, kind of like in open areas and stuff. But when you start flying close to buildings or in like residential areas where there's actually like Wi-Fi signals and whatnot around, or in dense areas like in forests or mountains and stuff, this is where you start running into problems. When you first boot up the drone, it will actually kind of like scan through all the channels and find the best channel with the least interference, but it doesn't mean that you're gonna fly free and not have any interference. So be very aware of this, that if you are flying in those kind of areas, that you may run into some interference issues. Now, when I've been flying, I haven't really flown it like super far away. Like I didn't really test out that 4-kilometer range, mainly because I know how bad the Wi-Fi is coming from the Mavic Air. And again, like for my uses, I don't need to fly 4 kilometers away. Like if I'm gonna fly that far away, I may as well use my Mavic 2 Pro. So just something to be aware of. I pretty much flew probably like maybe 500 meters away. A couple of times I had a few little interference issues, especially when I was flying near other drone pilots. I think because this is like, I don't know, maybe like a more budget one, they kind of took priority. So they had decent signal, but mine just pretty much got like blown out of the air. So if you're gonna fly with other people, make sure you stand a distance away from, so your signals don't get kind of intercrossed and you don't get that interference. Now my advice, if you do start losing connection, is basically if you can fly up, because generally most of the time if you fly up, then you get a better line of sight. Like if you're flying in a forest or something, typically if you fly up, then you clear the trees, or if you're near a mountain, then you clear the mountain or whatever, or a building. But again, if you can't fly up, if that's just not possible, like something above you, then just kind of like stop and leave it, and then kind of like reorientate yourself. Make sure your antennas are facing the drone itself. Maybe kind of like move away and try to get more of a line of sight of your drone, and that'll definitely help regain connection and make sure you don't lose your drone. And secondly, remember that this drone only weighs 249 grams. Like, don't expect to friggin' like fly in a hurricane or something. Like, it's just not gonna work. It can obviously handle like a bit of wind. Like I flew it in semi-windy conditions, but again, I don't want to fly in like 40-kilometer-hour winds because I don't want to lose the drone. So if you're wanting to fly a drone in like really high winds, then don't get this. Get like a Mavic Air 2, or get like a Mavic Pro or Mavic 2 Pro or something. Get something that's suited to those conditions. Again, these are limitations that are set, and if you operate inside these, then you're gonna get absolutely amazing images, and you're just gonna have a freaking blast. Now, as a price, the basic kit goes for $399 US, which is a freaking steal. Like, how I don't even understand how you can make a drone for $400 US that can do as much as this can do. And if you want to get the Fly More, that goes for $499 US. But again, if you're just getting into it and you're kind of still unsure, then pick one up secondhand. Like, I got this for 500 Australian dollars secondhand. Came with a whole bunch of like accessories and stuff. And it's sick. Like, the guy that I bought it off had only flew it a few times, so there was nothing wrong with it. I saved some money, still got a freaking good drone, and I'm having a blast. Just make sure that the previous owner hasn't like crashed it heaps. Like, pro don't buy my drones because I crash it a lot. But just make sure they took care of it so you're not getting like a really bad beaten up drone. If you did enjoy this review, guys, then consider liking and subscribing. And if you want to find out more about it, where to buy it, links are down below in the description. And as always, guys, stay creative and just be you. See ya.